people have a tendency to try and misuse any shiny tool that SEOs are ever given. You've got to have a limit to what makes up an entity. You can't just say everything in the world is an entity. Yes, you might say that property is an entity. And yes, you might say finance is a property and 10% is a concept. But you can't say property finance at 10% as an entity. This is just now just putting up more words and hoping that there's some magic that's going to work. So you've got to, as a human being, as a marketing person, understand that you have to, in order to communicate properly with the knowledge graph, you've got to communicate in concepts that are going to be understood by the knowledge graph. And the best way to do that is to combine entities that are clearly going to be actual entities, rather than try and make up your own and then finding some mythical web page out there and hoping that Google is going to decide that this mythical web page has the authority to be, a reason to set up a new database entry for a new concept that's never been in its knowledge graph whatsoever.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Dixon Jones back on the show with us. Dixon is the author of Entity SEO and the CEO of the entity-based SEO tool InLinks. He was previously CMO of Majestic and a longtime SEO speaker for over 20 years. He was also a past guest on this podcast, episode number 279. So he's back. It's great to have you back on the show, Dixon.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's first of all define for our listener, what the heck is an entity and why should they care?
Different people do tend to talk about entities and define them in a different sort of way. An entity is a concept, an idea, a thing that you can describe wholly and completely and put into a database. Now, for us, a database is something like a Wikipedia articles. I equate an entity as something that would have appeared in the Encyclopedia Britannica if Encyclopedia Britannica was still in paper form. Walking is an entity. A big brand, Dyson, is an entity. A notable person might be an entity. For me, part of it is, can you make yourself an entity or your brand an entity? But the more generic part of entities, and why I think it's important for SEO, is how do you associate your brand with the entities or concepts like hiking, like cars, like, restaurants, whatever is important to your brand. How do you associate your brand so closely to those entities that search engines and humans alike automatically associate your brand with the things that you're selling?
So how does one do that? How does one get in the knowledge graph, have a knowledge panel?
So getting your brand in the knowledge panel is all about getting your brand to be an entity in its own right. The ways in which you do that, the perfect way is get yourself a nice Wikipedia entry, no problem there. Just go on, do it, and you'll get deleted. That's a pretty surefire way. If you can get a Wikipedia page, that's great. Very difficult to do unless you have some superpowers in Wikipedia. More common is to look at a series of places that we think that Google uses to help educate its knowledge graph. So things like Crunchbase, IMDb, if you're a personality or an actor or a podcast writer for that matter, podcast editor for that matter. Companies House in the UK, for example, where companies are registered, New York Stock Exchange listings. There's a whole load of other ones, Wikidata, and a whole load of other places where they're kind of advanced directories. They're places where of authority where you would register your business or your business would be listed in a particular, industry sector. Those data sources, if they're done in the right way, can communicate some very good ideas to a search engine like Google and say, hey, this is a whole list of dental hygiene, licensed dental hygiene people or whatever. And a search engine might take that list and say, right, okay, I can use that list and I can use that to test that against other data sources that I've got to see whether this is A, true, and B, of interest to put into a knowledge graph. So building up a consistent picture of your brand across the internet is vital. One of the big parts of that is using some schema to identify yourself on your own web page. So you've got a place which is your authority for your brand. So even if you had a Wikipedia page, you might mention that in your schema to say, here's a Wikipedia page about my brand here, but you'd put it on your homepage and you'd hope that the Wikipedia page would then link back to your homepage at some point. And that would give corroboration from two different data sources that the authority for your brand is on your homepage. So you put some organizational schema in there. But more importantly for me, or just as importantly for me, and from the SEO perspective, is that you also can use schema to then say what the content is on the page that any user is reading. So any blog post or any article, you can use same as schema to say this page is about hiking. And in case you don't know what that is, Google, here's the Wikipedia page for hiking. It's also connected to this organization, Patagonia or whatever that may be. So you can sit there and help a search engine understand the fingerprint topics of a given web page, and they know that you're an expert in hopefully that particular subject as well. So, but the trick is to be consistent and not to try and spread yourself too thin. If you're a large organization like Amazon, then what you want to be known for is your main assets, like their cloud product, or the fact that they deliver, or they've got online shopping. They don't necessarily want to try with all their heart to be number one for used cars or number one for some of the products that they sell. That's not their problem. That's the problem of the people that own the shops that make, or the factories that make those products. And yes, you may still find Amazon in the results for, buying secondhand cars or whatever it is they sell. Ultimately, what Amazon is good for is their larger topics, and then other organizations get more specific. So you want to get very specific, whatever it is that you want to do, and try not to do be all things to all people, unless you are an Amazon, I suppose. I'll probably choose a bad example with Amazon, but they're the one that they can dominate the world, or them and Wikipedia, really.
Yeah. So the same as attribute, that's not something that we spoke about, I think, on the previous episode. And I know that that's something that you want to, at a minimum, utilize with the schema corporation or organization markup, so that you specify not just your social media URLs in your same as attribute, but also your Wikipedia article, if you have one, your Crunchbase and AngelList and Bloomberg URLs, all that.
Yeah, and you've got to make sure that they reciprocate back. So you don't try not to put your organizational page linking to a Crunchbase and then the Crunchbase going back to a different page, or citing a different page as the homepage. So that's a problem that we've had at InLinks. We went from inlinks.net to inlinks.com. It's not too bad because 1301's redirects to the other, but it's still not ideal because it's not just the whole website. It's usually a specific page that you want to tell. This is the page that says this is the definition of your organization. But I don't use same as for that. I do, of course, I use same as for that, but there are a lot of tools that will help you do that. Whether you've got a Yoast plugin or a Rank Math plugin or a bunch of other things, they will all help you set up that information about your organization or your website, whether it's you as an organization, or you as an individual, or you as an organization. But what most of them don't do is look at the actual content itself. And when they do it at the page level, what they're doing generally is saying, okay, is there some rich snippet to be had on FAQs here? Or is there some rich snippet to be had on the images on this page, or a video on this page? What the vast majority of those automated tools are not doing is saying, what is the actual content on this page, and how can we communicate that to a search engine? How do we turn this narrative of text into some very specific concepts? And there is a very valuable way of doing that using the same as tag in there. And that's where you do say this content is about this thing, which is the same as, and we use Wikipedia because we know that Google well understands Wikipedia, but it means that we can then take all the pages on the blog, and actually not all the pages. We want to give some kind of priority, the pillar pages, if you like, on the blog, and give them some context for a search engine over and above the organizational schema and the sort of the site-wide schema. You can do this very much at a brand level. Now, that doesn't result in any extra rich snippets, but we do think it helps a search engine to understand more fundamentally what the context is on a page, which may or may not help your rankings directly, but it should and does seem to disambiguate problems. So you're going to find yourself getting much more accurate traffic in there. And also, hopefully, we see that you get into Google Discover a lot more quickly. So tools like that, where Google understands what your page is, well, what this page is about. On another hand, it's understood what the user is interested in. So things like Google Discover will match those people up to your content, even though they weren't necessarily looking for your content that particular day.
So let's talk a bit about how to implement all this. You're going to use probably InLinks to accomplish this. Is there a way to do it?
You don't have to. No. Yeah. I mean, it's automatically done in InLinks. So in InLinks, what you do is we'll show you all the topics that your website has talked about, and you might have talked about hiking 32 times on your website. Now, if you don't give some indication to a search engine as to which page is the most important page about hiking on that out of those 32 possibilities, then there's a very real possibility that when a user is typing in hiking, you've cannibalized your content and you've given no guide as to where the authority is for hiking as a concept within your website. So by saying this, a human in the loop, you as a website owner or the webmaster, saying this is the page that's the important one about hiking, which Google may have figured out anyway, and hopefully did if you didn't do a bad job, but you're explicitly saying this is the page about hiking. And actually, this is a page about, let's say, hiking in the context of mountains. So you've got two concepts there. One is hiking, and there's hiking across fields, and there's another one hiking across mountains, or hiking across up Ben Nevis, which is the highest mountain in the UK in Scotland. So Ben Nevis is a concept, and hiking is a concept. So you can then say in the schema, you get the actual detail from schema.org. So I would suggest, because trusting Dixon to write schema over a podcast is not a great idea. But essentially, you're saying in the tags that this is about a thing called whatever it may be. That's a label for it. And in case you don't know what that is, Google, here is the Wikipedia URL to define that. Now, you could, in theory, put any URL in there. So it might be that this is about a person called Stephan, and here's the IMDb URL for Stephan Spencer. That's entirely possible. The reason that we use Wikipedia is twofold, really. The first is it's open sourced and continually updated. So if the underlying principle changes, the article will change eventually as well. So the definition of what that thing is will get updated by somebody. So if a famous president dies, then that will get reflected, as long as you're reflecting to a URL that gets updated, like Wikipedia. And it's open source, and we know that Google used it as a data source to this day, and probably will continue to do so. So that's a really good reason for using it. The other reason for using Wikipedia is people have a tendency to try and misuse any shiny tool that SEOs are ever given, and I think that this is a good example. If you don't say, you've got to have a limit to what makes up an entity. You can't just say everything in the world is an entity. Yes, you might say that property is an entity, and yes, you might say finance is a property and 10% is a concept, but you can't say property finance at 10% as an entity. This is just putting up more words and hoping that there's some magic that's going to work. So you've got to, as a human being, as a marketing person, understand that you have to, in order to communicate properly with the knowledge graph, you've got to communicate in concepts that are going to be understood by the knowledge graph. And the best way to do that is to combine entities that are clearly going to be actual entities, rather than trying to make up your own and then finding some mythical web page out there and hoping that Google is going to decide that this mythical web page has the authority to be, a reason to set up a new database entry for a new concept that's never been in its knowledge graph whatsoever. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let's use a specific example. Let's say that it's an online coach, someone who is coaching about setting up an online store, and they're just a one-man or woman band, and they have a small website with maybe 20 pages. So how would they do this without using InLinks?
Probably, if they were a one-man band, then a one-woman band, then they would probably use their homepage to try and set themselves up as an entity or their organization as an entity on their homepage. But then they would likely have a page for coaching, and a page for best practices for an online store, and a bunch of other articles. But let's go for the coaching page, because I think this is the one that is probably at the heart of their business. So on the coaching page, they would say, okay, we need a same as tag to say that this content is the most important page on my website for the concept of coaching. So they would say, this is about a thing called coaching. And in case you don't know what that is, Google, because let's face it, Google could sit there and say coaching is about something to do with buses. It can make a lot of different definitions,
or
at least two that I can think of. Oh, baseball. Yeah, well, exactly. We'll come on to that one. But it's about the concept of coaching. Teaching. It's actually about teaching in the context of an online store. So it's about this, which is the same as this Wikipedia URL for teaching or coaching. Choose one and stick with it. And then it's also mentions the context of online stores, or it's also about the context of online stores. Perhaps it mentions Shopify and WooCommerce. So you could also use the mentions tag, saying to give it some secondary context as well. So then you've got 4 lines of code saying it's about teaching and online stores, and it mentions Shopify and WooCommerce. Now, just with those 4 points, which are data points for a knowledge graph can now pretty much see that there's only a fraction of pages in the world that are relevant to those 4 concepts with that kind of priority. So it rapidly helps a large data model to shrink down and say, using numbers, because those translate to numbers in their knowledge graph, to find pages that have a very close imprint to the concept that the user is trying to look into. So when somebody is trying to look at what's better, WooCommerce or Shopify in e-commerce, then Google can say, hey, okay, you need some coaching. You can do whatever it likes. So you can think about it, come up with the concepts, and then try and find some data points that match it. And it sits there and sees that this page is well and truly about that those concepts. So it's a close match. Now, that only works, of course, if you don't get too broad in what you're trying to do on the page. If you sit there and say, right, I'm going to make this a review of all the different e-commerce platforms out there, and there's going to be 40, 50 of them, then that's actually giving a different message to the user, and so to the search engines. And you might then only get content back when it's about e-commerce reviews, not about learning about e-commerce. So being as specific as possible is the key, and not trying to go too broad in your content. It's a bit like keyword stuffing. If you do it the other way, it doesn't really do much good at all. If you remember that, well, I know you do.
Not because I did it, but because I've been around.
No.
Yeah. In the case of, let's say, a person wanting to get a knowledge panel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like let's use you as an example. So I just
Yeah,
Googled.
mine's rubbish, but I am there. If you type in Dixon Jones SEO, you will find it in there, I think. So you're no doubt going to do it as we're live on the podcast. So hopefully you can find me there.
I put in Dixon Jones just without the SEO.
And you got a bunch of architects, no doubt. Yeah.
No, I got on the right-hand side, I got results about Dixon Jones architectural firm, and then Dixon Jones internet marketer.
Okay, so I've had this problem disambiguating for 25 years now, and the problem started when I bought DixonJones.com and Dixon Jones the architects bought DixonJones.co.uk. Unfortunately, the architects have been around for 40 years and designed the Royal Opera House in London and goodness knows, they've done some pretty impressive buildings, and they do have a good Wikipedia page and they've got some fantastic stuff.
They went out of business in 2020.
But it got better when they went out of business. So that's good. So now Google, I've just got to wait for Google to lose confidence in this company that doesn't exist anymore. But it wasn't helped by the fact that in the early days, I wanted to try and disambiguate myself. So I had a page on DixonJones.com saying /architects, which, well, I could argue I was trying to disambiguate. What I was trying to do was get the traffic and then disambiguate. So that page was saying, I am not Dixon Jones, the architects. If you would like to talk to them, they are over here, et cetera, et cetera. So I then, in the process of doing that, gave myself some association to Dixon Jones, the architects, but not with the authority of the actual homepage. And of course, Google got it right most of the time. And when you typed in Dixon Jones, the architects always came up top before the Google panel knowledge panel ever existed. And even on relatively simple search engines, you go to Majestic, which has got a search engine, and type in Dixon Jones. Even in my own search engine, or what was my own search engine, it will put the Wikipedia company up first, or used to. It may not now because they've come offline. But trying to get my panel in there, what I did was I became a product leader on Crunchbase. I wrote a book. Writing a book is a good way to give yourself a knowledge panel, I have to say. And I think at the end of the day, it's not so much getting the book on Amazon that helped. It was making sure that it had a proper ISBN number, or you got an American equivalent of that as well. I think ultimately it was getting into Goodreads, not getting into Amazon, that gave me the panel, I think. And then it's a case of, well, can Google match everything up? So can it then say, right, this book over here is the same as this web page over here that is the home page. It's the same as this Crunchbase profile over here. I now also have an IMD profile for a podcast I used to do, and I used to write and run Murder Mystery Evenings, which is probably not a good thing to associate with me because it's so far off what I want to be known for now. But the podcast was SEO related, so that was okay. These are the things I've got together. I would say that I'm not particularly noteworthy. Well, I'm definitely not very noteworthy at all, but I'm enough to get a knowledge panel. And if I can do it, anybody can do it, because I have no importance in the world whatsoever, except trying to influence search engines a little bit. I would doubt that anybody would see my knowledge panel unless they were also related to the SEO industry or the internet marketing industry. So people that are on this podcast that don't know about, or are not seen day to day as interested in the topic matter, may well not see me in the knowledge panel, because they try, Google is trying to match the user query with the user intent, and the user query is only talking about Dixon Jones in the concept of SEO if the user is interested in SEO or internet marketing.
So you're saying that Goodreads was probably a pivotal accomplishment for you getting in there with your book, not necessarily getting into Google Books, which I thought, because I see that as a source in many knowledge panels for authors, if they're not notable enough to be in Wikipedia and they don't have a Wikipedia page, but they have a listing or their book is listed in Google Books. Then
I think one dictated the other. I think that Goodreads was picked up by Google and then put into it went to Google Books via. I don't recall going and registering on Google Books. I think Google seems to pick this up from third-party data sources, including Amazon, I'm sure. But I got the feeling that Goodreads and the Knowledge Panel came along very closely after each other.
Okay, got it. And did you get a database entry in Wikidata?
I did. That comes as an automatic thing or aspect of Goodreads. I had one in there anyway because I tried to disambiguate Dixon Jones, the architects from Dixon Jones, the internet marketer, and that worked for a while. And then eventually Wikidata said, yes, we need some more notable articles for Dixon Jones, the SEO, and they were not happy with the ones that were put forward. Goodreads then generated it automatically, so that became a great one because I could then refer to an auto-generated Wikidata article. However, I think because of the first one, I think the whole lot's been deleted now, and I don't think it's in there. But I might be wrong. I haven't looked recently, but I kind of feel that I've got a page in there which the last time I looked was talking with a human editor there, who said, "Come back with some better cited sources, and we'll put you back in." I'm kind of, and I don't want to
get requirements for Wikidata as well as Wikipedia, and they're not necessarily as stringent as Wikipedia, but
they still exist. Yeah, they still exist. Yeah, and I don't want to push the envelope because I'm not that notable, really. At the end of it, so
a big deal.
and so I would rather concentrate now on trying to be, I suppose, more notable. Well, no, actually, narrower focus. Just known for being the SEO and the SEO that manages a SaaS and be notable at the things I am known for, and try and not mess that up. And I think that I'll get there eventually. So, I mean, as you see, I am there, but so it knows where I went to university. It knows date of birth. It knows a bunch of other things about me that I have seen in the knowledge graph. But I think there's also a confidence level that Google goes through as to how confident is it that it's the right answer for the right person at the right time. And frankly, it hasn't got much confidence in me whatsoever.
Yeah. So there's a tool on Calicube.
Yeah, brilliant. And I've used that a lot, actually. I should have said that. I think Jason does a brilliant job of citing the data sources he's seen or his systems have seen in knowledge panels. And so, the argument goes, if Google has used a particular data source and put it into a knowledge panel, then why not go and make sure that your records on those data sources are kept up to date? It's an effective tool to do that. And I think, that helped me very much get into the knowledge panel, actually, is using Calicube's tool.
Yeah, so Calicube actually has a number of tools. If you go to calicube.pro, and then you'll see some tools listed on the top nav, such as the knowledge graph trusted sources list, and then the knowledge graph explorer tool, which gives you the if you put in a keyword, it'll put into, I don't know how it does this, but it somehow gets these IDs back of knowledge graph entries, even if there's no knowledge panel showing up for that search query.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have a low confidence level, or Google has the low confidence level of that entity and doesn't show it as a knowledge panel, it's still in the knowledge graph, you can see it there in Calicube's tool.
In the paid version of the tool, I found it quite useful, but I did need Jason's help. Jason was the owner of Calicube, helped me quite a bit to go through. But it actually kind of tries to read the entries and tell you where there's disconnect in joining the dots, and you can then go and improve your systems. And it was, amazing how much you could pick up citations of yourself, or if it's your brand, then your brand, and work with those. However, what was also interesting is that the search engines pulled out a lot of stuff that was wrong, and being able to tell or build code that sort of disambiguated that was useful, or make sure that you were not associated with, in my case, an architect, is helpful as well. Although I think ultimately all it did was it generated your organizational code for you. So basically, or in my case, your schema as to say, hey, this is a person called Dixon Jones, and he is the same as these profiles around the world. It gave you the code for that, but it also allowed you to just jump over to these places and get registered on some things that you may not have been seen on, or you were seen but you had an old URL. I used to be founder of an agency called Receptional. The agency still exists. I think they've eradicated all mention of me whatsoever. I might still be on some systems somewhere, and they don't particularly want to be associated. It's not they don't want to be associated with me. I think they're still happy to call me the founder, but they've got their own culture and they've moved on, and that's fine with me. So I don't really want to be linked through to say Dixon Jones is founder of Reception, a CEO of Reception, because I'm not. That's Justin.
Yeah. So, and when you were talking about Jason, we're referring to Jason Barnard, who was a past guest on this show. So if you're interested in learning a lot more about the knowledge graph and getting knowledge panel, there's a lot more in that episode as well. The CalCube .pro tools are not just the knowledge graph explorer and trusted sources list. He's got a brand SERP tool, I think. There's knowledge graph sensor, brand SERP explorer or something. Yep. Anyways, there's some really great tools for free.
I mean, really, this whole idea of entities is really interesting. That there's 3 or 4 people that kind of jumped out and sort of try to find a way forward with it. One of them is Andrea from WordLift. He came up with a tool that kind of looks at content. Jason looked at this idea of your brand being the entity and how to make your brand really stand out properly in all things digital. And I came at I approached it from this idea of the concepts that the more generic concepts and associating yourself to those concepts. We think that and we think they all dovetail each other really well, but they're slightly different ways out of the starting gate, I suppose, for the idea of an entity based approach to search engine optimization anyway, but also to brand building, and they've worked very well. So I've also had Jason on my podcast as well, and I've been on his, and we've talked quite a bit about these kind of things, and it's interesting that we had to wake up one day and say, hey, Google's changed here, but we don't know how. No one really told us how, but we can't stop, and it's going to happen all over again with LLMs.
Yeah, large language models.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's going to be the next challenge, and it's not that all the work that they've been doing with entities has gone away, but certainly I think that large language models and natural language processing overlap pretty well, and I think that the work we've been doing at InLinks can map very nicely onto how large language learning models work, and hopefully will be an extension of that.
How does SEO change now that large language models such as ChatGPT and Google Bard are so much part of the world now?
This is where I have to get philosophical, Stephan, because I think that the interesting thing about these models is that they're based on reading millions and millions or billions and billions of documents and getting a consensus of ideas. So it's going through billions of documents, tying them into sort of concepts that are tied together. So knowledge panels are connecting dots, which is why they find trouble citing their sources sometimes. The way that they're learning is much more like looking at information in the same way that our brains look at information. So our brains are made up with, billions and billions of synapses connected together. The way Jeannie, my daughter, now talks on SEO as well, because I'm that old in life. And the way that her degree was in language, culture, and communications, and so she learned schema and talks about schema in terms of a guy called Piaget, who was in the 19th century or 1900 something, talked about schema as an extension of the way the Greeks looked at schema, which is saying, right, the way that humans are making up their understanding of the world is individually, each person individually is waking up one day and finding new experiences, and every new experience will potentially alter their view of the world. So her example is you wake up one day and you're a kid and you go into a field and you see something with four legs and hair and a big tongue, and you're told it's a cow, and you say, right, okay, now I understand. Now I know everything about a cow. I've seen one in real life. I absolutely understand a cow. Next day you walk up and then you go and point to a horse and say, hey, Daddy, there's a cow. And of course, it's not. And you have to correct your schema, and you have to work out the difference between a horse and a cow. And you have to address that. And that is constantly happening in the human brain. And it means that we as individuals will grow up looking at life a little bit differently. The example I use in my talk is, can carrots help you see in the dark? And if you ask the average Brit, they will say yes. If you ask the average American, they'll say what? The truth is that during World War II, Winston Churchill's war machine, they were trying to do two things. Firstly, they were trying to get the kids to eat carrots. Secondly, because that's all the food they had. Secondly, they were trying to explain why Spitfires could suddenly find the Luftwaffe without giving away the fact they had radar, because radar was a secret weapon for them. So they were using this to say, we give the pilots loads of carrots so they can see in the dark. That propagated on through generations of Brits who, tell their kids that, carrots can help you see in the dark. Any other country, they didn't get that schema. They didn't get that concept of the world. So they have a different view of the world. Turns out everybody else's view is correct. But, until I was quite old, I genuinely thought that the vitamin A, D, whatever could help you see better in the dark. Turns out, whether it's true or not, the reason that I came up with it was completely false. So correlation may not be causation. And I think that for LLMs, this is exactly the same methodology. These systems are going to come out with some outright lies, or things that we think are outright lies, but they are just a formation of their own schema based on the things that they've seen, which is really a reflection of what we've all written as human beings over the last, a few hundred years, because these things have gone and read all the books for the last few hundred years. So if we as society say things wrong, then that's going to make the chat GPTs of this world get things wrong if we start to do it at scale. So if we then go back to the 1960s and how advertising and marketing worked in the 1960s, it wasn't how to get into the head of the user. It was all about TVers coming online. How do you get into the psyche of all of the audience that are out there? And I think that's what's happening now with trying to optimize for, if we start to properly think about this and try to optimize for ChatGPT, then what I see that is how do we get it so that our brand is talked about, or the brand that the things that we stand for are talked about when somebody asks a related question to ChatGPT. So on the simple level, that is, what are the best vacuum cleaners? And you would hope that Dyson and Hoover and Shark are in the list of what comes back. That's very, very specific. What's even more impressive, though, is how do I clean up dust in my carpet? And then if a Dyson or a Shark or a Hoover gets listed in that answer, then I would say that some SEO somewhere has done a good job. And I think that in order to do that, you have to go back to this idea of making sure that your brand is very, very closely associated with a very narrow and well-defined idea. Carpets or hoovering, vacuum cleaning. Well, hoovering have done it, So hoovering is already a verb. So trying to make yourself a verb.
Well, maybe in the UK, not so much here in the US.
No, okay. So in the UK, we all grew up saying, get the Hoover out. And now we might say get the Dyson out, but certainly growing up, getting the Hoover was a thing, a concept, and I think that we need to work on that. But anyway, the optimizing for ChatGPT and those systems is all about the same thing as the madmen of the 60s trying to convince a whole generation that a particular brand was the right thing to associate with butter or toothpaste or whatever it may be.
Yeah, if you don't do entity SEO, if you don't do link building or technical SEO on your website, you're going to make it a lot harder for the large language models to know that you exist and that you're part of the global conversation in your niche or topic.
It's like digital oil, isn't it, really? You're oiling the system.
Let's talk about your new social media tool, because we haven't talked about that yet.
Okay. That's just come out. Yes. Yeah. We're taking a bit of a pump with this. I think it's the right idea. I mean, the idea of coming out with a new Buffer or a new HubSpot or whatever, or something, Sprout Social or whatever your favorite tweeting technology is, initially for me seemed to be a dangerous thing for us to get into. It's a big world with a lot of players in it. But what we realized was that none of these tools were really creating a content plan for tweeting and Facebook posting and LinkedIn posting that was sensibly curated. And by that, I mean, usually most of the tools, you just write your post. That's it. You just wake up and you type into it and it will post on those three things next Tuesday for you. Cool. Knowing what to write was a lot harder to get right. I think is a lot harder to get right. And maybe not for an individual, but for a brand, it's very difficult because you've got a brand may have lots of stakeholders, lots of people, customers, values, and expertise that's possibly siloed all around the organization. So knowing what to tweet about, especially if you want to tweet every day and LinkedIn post every day, and you want to come across as a brand that is a knowledge leader in your field, but not a knowledge leader outside your field, then you can't just make up some words and say, right, give me a whole bunch of things and go to OpenAI and create a bunch of tweets. You need this step in between that gives you a list of things to tweet about or post about that is coherent with your existing strategies. So what we did was said, right, okay, well, I think we've got something here because we already know all the topics that your website is talking about. So what we can do is take all these topics, then we can generate more ideas. We can use Google Suggest to generate more ideas around there. So what are people actually looking for around the concept of vacuum cleaning a carpet? So you can put in vacuum cleaner into Google, and Google Suggest will come out with a whole different things about, price of a vacuum cleaner, or, things to do with the vacuum cleaner, or, how to repair your vacuum cleaner, whatever the things may be. It'll come out with loads and loads of different ideas, but it may come out with things that are not appropriate to your content as well. So the example I use is Mustang. So if you put in Mustang, there's how to buy a Mustang, how to service your Mustang, but there's also how to feed a Mustang and how to, what kind of grazing do you use on a Mustang? There's also some stuff about Mustang involving aeroplanes. Mustang has 3 different concepts. And when you go to Google Suggest, some of those are going to be, unless Google's got other context, like knowing your history and your predisposition to horses versus cars, it'll come up with suggestions. So you need to then put the suggestions through the loop as well, and see whether the suggestions coming out by the system are closely related to the content already on the website. So the result of doing this, which runs for a fair amount of time, but on your site, we can throw it all back in, and so we can take your website and say, right, from your website, here are all the primary concepts that are important. We cluster those up. These are the kind of questions that people are typing in there that are really interesting, that people want answers to, that are semantically close to your existing content. We'll also pull out Q&As that you've already put on your website and say, right, here's a tweet and here's an answer that you've already written. So these are there. So we'll have a list of thousands for an average site. For an average site, let's say it's a site with 100 pages, we will have thousands of ideas. We'll have them clustered by concept as well. So you've got, maybe half a dozen concepts, and within each of those, you've got 10 or 20 different things that you could tweet about. So it comes up to thousands. So you can then take that and say, right, as a human being, all that work's done for me. All I had to do was put in a website. I'm going to go, yes, 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 yes. Click the ones that I think are important. Some of them will be very similar to each other. You can delete the ones that you don't want to just with a click. But that builds very quickly a content plan for the next 52 weeks, if you like, of ideas. So by having all of those ideas put out in front of you that are built out of your existing web presence, you take away a huge amount of bias in a personal social media manager's decision-making process. So a social media manager that doesn't have the ability to suddenly read all of the website and make sure that they grab all the ideas and throw them back in, which would be thousands of hours of work, is then coming back with a plan that is now going back and you've got a logic for what those ideas are there for, and you can then get buy-in for that plan based on some kind of science, rather than, oh, you know what, we've got the Pride Festival over here, we should probably do something about Pride, or just coming out with an idea that seems like it's going to be catchy. You can do that too, but when it comes to a brand, you need to have some kind of consistency and completeness in your social media marketing. So by coming out with that, and then you create the posts based on that. So you agree the plan, here's the next 20, 30, 50, 200 posts, whatever it may be. And then we do allow you to write your own, or alternatively, you can press the button and allow ChatGPT to do the first draft at least for you. But that's not the prime bit of the tool. The prime bit was getting that list in the first place and making a much more scientific judgment on there. And then the tool will allow you to say, right, I've posted it. We now want a call to action. What's the web page on our website that's most appropriate for this? And you can choose it from the drop down. Or and if you want to add an image, you can either upload your own, or it'll link into Pixabay and use open source images if that's what you want to do as well, to give it a bit more pizzazz, so to speak. So and then you can schedule it. So it does the same things that that other social media schedulers do. It's that pre-bit of, what the hell do I do, not just tomorrow, but for the next 6 months in my social media plan, and how do I connect these dots, and how do I and by doing it this way, we're tying it back to the SEO that's been done on the site, the content that's been done on the site, the brand itself. So we feel that we're going to develop somebody's social media strategy in consort with their SEO strategy, and in consort with the concept of entities, things, not strings.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And that's a very different approach from, let's say, going to also asked.com and having it aggregate for you a bunch of questions based on.
Yeah, it is different. So Mark Williamson is Williamson Cook runs Also Asked, I think, set up, and I've got a lot of respect for him, and we share a little a little back room where we cry about the SaaS issues with SaaS when the credit card stops working and these kind of things. So so we get on quite well. But you're right, he does different things. It's definitely a different approach. For a start, he uses PAA. People also asked, whereas we're using Google Suggest, but the input is different for both systems.
Yeah. And they both have a great place in your strategy. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the new tool.
Thank you very much. I hope people try it out. The only thing I would say is you can use it on the free plan, but at InLinks, but you need to have at least 20 pages in the system before we start thinking. On a free plan, you only get 20 pages. So you've got to basically put in 20 pages of your website before we've got enough ammunition to go and start finding the ideas for the plan. But it can be done.
Cool. Well, any parting words of wisdom that we haven't already talked about for our listener?
I think if my word of wisdom for the day would be, we're all wise. It's just a question of what. We can't all be wise at everything, and whoever you admire in life, it's only going to be in context.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show and sharing what you're up to and what can help move the needle for our listener.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much, Stephan.
Yes. And your website is InLinks.com.
InLinks.com now. It may have been InLinks.net when we last spoke.
Yeah, I think it was.
We had a very nice customer who pretty much gave us the domain. So, I've given him a free account, for as long as he wants it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, congratulations. And congratulations on the success of your company and forging out on your own after Majestic and creating a really great SaaS tool.
Thanks a lot, Stephan.
Thank you. And thank you, listener. Get out there and do some Entity SEO. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.